The rain didn't care about my pain. It poured down in relentless sheets, soaking through the thin fabric of my jacket, drenching my hair, chilling me to the bone. I dragged the worn-out suitcase behind me, each step heavier than the last, but not because of the weight of my things. No, it was the weight of their laughter, their sharp, cruel eyes cutting into me, embedding themselves in my chest like shards of glass. Behind the rain-streaked windows, they sat in smug comfort, the glow of the living room flickering across their faces as if highlighting their triumph. I could hear it mocking, sharp, unyielding. They thought I had nothing, I whispered to myself, the words swallowed by the storm. They laughed as I walked away, but they had no idea what I was about to become. Every step forward was a fight against the doubt they planted in me. Every drop of rain a reminder that I had left everything I knew, everything familiar, for nothing but a chance to prove myself. Years of bending, obeying, trying to earn their approval flashed before me like a cruel slideshow. And for what? A cruel laugh at my expense as I left the only home I had ever known. "You'll never make it on your own," their voices echoed. "Just leave. See if the world takes care of you." And I did leave. No money.
No shelter.
No safety net. Just raw, burning determination. I had nothing but the seed of a belief, an unshakable need to prove that they were wrong, to rise from the ashes of their scorn. The city welcomed me with wet streets, slick asphalt reflecting neon signs like scattered stars. Every puddle became a mirror, showing me the reflection of a boy who was hungry, desperate, but alive. I clenched my fists, feeling the cold metal of my watch press into my skin. Time. I still had time. Time to rebuild. Time to rise. And as the sound of their laughter faded into the distance, a strange clarity settled in me. Freedom wasn't warmth or comfort. Freedom wasn't their praise. Freedom was this isolation, this storm, this raw confrontation with myself. The very people who were meant to protect me had pushed me into the tempest. And storms, I realized, reveal strength. The boy they laughed at no longer existed. He was gone. What remained was a man, rising from the rain, unarmed no longer. Hungry, focused, relentless, unstoppable. I looked up at the dark, moody sky, letting the rain wash over me. Every drop felt like a baptism. Every step forward felt like reclamation. They had counted on my weakness, assumed my failure. But the truth was simple. The boy they mocked had learned something they could never teach. A man can rise from nothing, and when he does, there's no laughter loud enough to drown the fire within. The streets were quiet, almost painfully so, as dawn broke over the city. I clutched a grocery bag heavier than it looked, and my eyes found a gleaming office building across the street, a monument to everything I didn't have. My clothes were worn, shoes scuffed, and my hands raw from the work I'd done the night before. But in my chest, a fire burned that no exhaustion could snuff out. I whispered to myself, I have nothing. Yet even nothing has a beginning. Those first nights away from home were relentless. I slept in cramped rooms where the paint peeled like old scabs and the dampness settled into my bones. Hunger gnawed at me, sharp and unforgiving, while my hands blistered from work I hadn't imagined doing. Washing dishes, delivering packages, scrubbing floors until my arms shook. Every shift left me ragged. Every rejection in interviews left me bruised. Not physically, but inside, where doubt lurked like a shadow waiting to consume me. And yet, each hardship was a teacher. Every slammed door, every no whispered the truth of the world. Loyalty isn't guaranteed, dreams aren't respected, and nothing worth having is given freely. The world didn't owe me anything. I owed myself everything. I remember one night in particular. After a double shift at a cafe, my feet numb, arms quivering from carrying trays, I walked past a small streetlight. Its flickering glow spilled across the wet pavement, and I saw my reflection in a puddle. Tired, ragged, broken. But something in my eyes refused to bend. That flicker of determination, the last ember I carried, was enough. It was all I needed to keep moving forward. And then, a crack of light in the darkness. A mentor at the cafe, someone who noticed the grit behind my exhaustion, offered me guidance for a modest freelance task. It wasn't much. It wasn't a windfall, but it was a spark. A single chance to turn struggle into progress, to prove to myself that even the smallest victories mattered. I realized something crucial. Survival was a victory in itself. Every rejection, every hardship was shaping me. I wasn't merely existing. I was learning to take what the world refused to give. Respect, I would earn it. Opportunity, I would create it. No one would hand me anything, not even decency. And that was fine, because I had discovered something stronger than comfort. I had discovered resilience. The weight of my past, of my failures, of the laughter and ridicule that had haunted me, pressed on me like the groceries in my hands. But as I completed that first freelance project and saw approval in my mentor's eyes, I understood something profound. The world had not broken me. I had not fallen. I was not done. I was just beginning. The rain outside echoed the storm inside me. It streaked down the window in harsh lines as I stood in that dim office, holding a folder that trembled in my hands. The room was silent, but my heartbeat wasn't. It pounded, loud enough to drown out every thought except the one truth I couldn't escape. Betrayal doesn't whisper. It strikes like lightning. Sudden, merciless, impossible to ignore. The people I trusted the most had been working against me all along. Life had finally started showing me small victories. Tiny sparks that hinted at a future I was fighting tooth and nail to build. But success, I learned, has a price, and some people pay it by cutting down the ones who are climbing. That night, while sorting through paperwork for my small, growing business, I found letters, contracts, emails. Proof. Cold, undeniable proof that someone in my own family, someone I trusted without question, had been quietly sabotaging me. First, the words blurred. My hands shook. My chest tightened as though the room itself had shrunk around me. Each sentence on the page wasn't just information, they were wounds. Deals I thought had fallen through by chance. Opportunities that slipped away. Doors that slammed shut in my face. They weren't accidents. They were engineered, designed, delivered by someone I once believed would stand beside me. I thought of the countless times I had sat with them, sharing dreams they pretended to support. I remembered the way they gave advice, the way they smiled, the way they nodded as if proud of me. All the while, they were twisting the knife behind my back. I stepped away from the desk, letting the papers fall from my hands. The rustle of the documents hitting the floor cut through the silence, sharper than any shout. My mind replayed every moment with them. Every conversation that suddenly meant something different. Every gesture that now carried the stench of deceit. And it hit me with brutal clarity. Their support had been a lie, a mask, a performance. I had loved blindly, but now, the love I believed in had vanished like smoke. The pain was deeper than hunger, sharper than exhaustion, heavier than any struggle I'd faced on the streets. But under the heartbreak, something else rose. Something fierce, something alive. A fire that betrayal couldn't extinguish. This wasn't the end. This wasn't my downfall. This betrayal was a catalyst, a brutal awakening. It showed me the truth. I had no one to rely on but myself. No one to trust but the person staring back at me in the darkened window. I sat in that cold office, surrounded by evidence of their deception, and slowly, I smiled. Not out of joy, out of defiance, out of understanding. They had counted on my weakness. They had bet on my failure. But they were wrong. You tried to break me? I whispered into the empty room. You failed. And now, you will see what I am capable of. Night swallowed the city, and for the first time in a long time, it swallowed me too. I sat alone on a curb beneath a flickering streetlight, the kind that buzzes and threatens to go dark at any moment. Rain pooled around my shoes, spreading across the pavement like the world was quietly bleeding. My hands covered my face as cars rushed by. Footsteps echoed, strangers moved around me. None of them slowing, none of them noticing. I wasn't part of their world. Not tonight. There comes a moment when life doesn't just hit you. It shatters you. I thought I had reached my limit before. I thought I had already suffered enough. But that night, I learned the truth. Pain has no bottom until you hit it yourself. After discovering the betrayal, something inside me didn't explode. It snapped. Quietly, almost politely, as if the universe wanted to make sure I felt every inch of the breaking. I walked for hours with no direction, letting the rain soak through my clothes, letting the neon lights smear into colorless streaks. Even the noise felt distant, like the world was fading farther away with each step I took. By the time I reached the alley behind the cafe where I once worked, my legs simply gave out. I sank onto the cold pavement, pulling my knees to my chest as if I could make myself smaller, harder to hurt. The ground was freezing, my clothes clinging to me, my hands trembling. Not from the cold, but from the heaviness inside my chest. For the first time since I left home, I felt defeated. Not because I was poor, not because I was hungry, but because I finally understood how deeply alone I was. My family hadn't just laughed at me, they wanted me to fail. People I trusted hadn't just doubted me, they used me. And the betrayal I discovered had taken what little trust one had left and crushed it into dust. It felt like drowning in the middle of a city that kept breathing, kept moving, kept ignoring the person sinking right in front of it. Hours passed. Maybe more. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I wasn't sure I could. Tears blended with rain on my face, and even if someone noticed, no one cared enough to stop. Pain teaches you in ways comfort never can. That night, I learned what it meant to break quietly, to fall without a sound, to scream where no one hears you. I wanted to give up, on the dream, on the fight, on myself. But somewhere in the middle of all that darkness, a whisper rose inside me. Faint, stubborn, impossible to kill. Not yet. I didn't understand it then. But sometimes you have to hit the ground to understand just how badly you want to rise. As I sat there, numb and defeated, a single thought drifted through my mind. If I can survive this night, I can survive anything. I didn't get up right away. I didn't suddenly transform into someone strong. But something inside me shifted. An ember refusing to die in the place where life tried to bury me. This was my lowest point, and the quiet beginning of my rebirth. The morning after my darkest night didn't feel triumphant. It didn't feel healing. Felt quiet. Almost too quiet. Like the storm inside me had finally exhausted itself and left behind an empty, fragile stillness. I dragged my tired body up to the rooftop of the hostel, needing air that didn't taste like the walls closing in on me. I needed space. Space to breathe, to think, to feel something other than the weight crushing my chest. From above, the city didn't look as cruel as it had the night before. It looked tired, worn, honest, like a battlefield I had crossed and somehow survived. And as the sun slowly broke through the morning clouds, its light fell across my face with a gentleness I hadn't felt in months. Warm, soft, undeserved, yet comforting. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like running. I didn't feel like hiding. I simply sat there, letting the dawn settle around me. That's when I remembered the envelope. The one my mentor from the cafe had quietly slipped into my hand days earlier. Back then, I was too numb to open it, too beaten to believe anything inside would matter. But now, in this quiet morning air, something inside me shifted. Not a miracle, not hope, just a decision, small but solid. I opened it. Inside was a simple job offer, entry level, modest pay, nothing glamorous, but it was real. It was honest. It was a hand reaching toward me when I had convinced myself no one cared whether I sank or not. As I held the paper, something tightened inside my chest. Not fear this time, not grief, but clarity. This wasn't just a job. It was breath to a drowning man, a rope in the dark, a step, finally a step, toward something bigger than survival. For the first time in weeks, my lungs filled without hurting. For the first time in months, my thoughts weren't drowning in betrayal or loss. All I could see was a small doorway opening, and the possibility of walking through it. I realized the world wasn't waiting to save me. I whispered into the morning air. It never had. If I wanted a future, I had to climb toward it myself. That single realization changed everything. The offer in my hands wasn't about money or status, it was about movement. Proof that I wasn't trapped. Proof that even broken people can rise if they refuse to stay down. I stood up slowly, feeling the rooftop beneath my feet, the sunlight warming my skin, the wind brushing against a version of me I barely recognized anymore. The city didn't look impossible now. It looked like a test, and for the first time I felt ready to face it. I didn't scream. I didn't celebrate. I simply whispered a promise. A vow spoken only to myself. I will never return to who I was. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was the moment everything changed. The moment the old version of me died, and the man I would become opened his eyes for the first time. Soft morning light spills across a cluttered desk. Laptop open, notebooks filled, coffee steaming. I sit with tired but razor-focused eyes, typing like someone fighting for air. I wasn't gifted anything. I earned every skill with sleepless nights, shaking hands, and a fire no one believed I had. Most people wouldn't call that job a fresh start. It wasn't glamorous, powerful, or impressive. Most days I was answering emails, fixing forgotten tasks, cleaning up the work no one else wanted. But those small tasks, they were doors. Cracks of light in a room that had been dark for too long. And then there was my mentor. Hard, cold, demanding, never praising, never comforting. He pushed me like a sculptor chipping away at unmolded stone. And sometimes it hurt, but I knew I needed the pain. Slowly, I changed. I learned how systems worked, how business moved, how people thought. I stayed late almost every night, studying everything from communication to design to sales. While others clocked out to relax, I clocked in to rebuild myself. The office became my battlefield, the keyboard my weapon. Every new skill, every breakthrough, felt like a victory I carved into my own bones. My back ached from long nights. My eyes burned from too many screens. Some mornings, I walked in after only 2 hours of sleep. People whispered behind my back, "He's trying too hard. He'll burn out." He came from nothing. He'll return to nothing. But I didn't care. They were judging the version of me they could see, while I was already building the version they couldn't imagine. And then, slowly, everything shifted. Tasks that once terrified me became routine. Clients started requesting me by name. My mentor, once distant and cold, began giving me assignments he trusted to very few. I was growing, quietly, dangerously. I realized skills are the one thing no one can take from you. Not family, not betrayal, not poverty. Skills turn nobodies into threats. The more I learned, the more it all made sense. My past wasn't a curse, it was gasoline. My loneliness wasn't punishment, it was clarity. My pain wasn't my enemy, it was my teacher. And I could feel myself changing, not just in work, but in presence, in confidence, in silence. There was power in me now. Not loud, not arrogant, but sharp, focused, unshakable. Late night keyboard tapping, office AC humming, echoes of the empty building, coffee cups stacking like small monuments, laptop humming with exhaustion, just like me. Then, one night, something unexpected happened. I was packing my things when my mentor walked over. He placed a hand on my shoulder, something he had never done. "You learned faster than anyone I've met," he said quietly. "You're not meant to work under people. You're meant to build something of your own." His words didn't inflate my ego. They confirmed a truth I had always carried inside me. That night, walking home under dim streetlights, with tired feet but an awakened spirit, one truth echoed inside me. I'm ready. Ready to leave survival mode. Ready to rise. Ready to build an empire from the ashes they left me in. I used to think a man breaks only once in his life. One dramatic collapse. One moment where everything falls apart at once. But the truth hits much quieter than that. A man doesn't break in a single moment. He breaks slowly, silently, piece by piece, long before anyone ever notices. And that's exactly what was happening to me. I remember that morning too clearly. A sky heavy with clouds, but nothing compared to the storm twisting inside my chest. I woke up with the same weight I had carried for months, the weight that comes from pretending everything is fine when every part of you is sinking. At home, my family still laughed behind closed doors. At work, I was a ghost. In life, I was losing pieces of myself without making a sound. But that day, something shifted. Not because someone helped me, not because someone finally cared, not because the world suddenly became kinder. It changed because I finally understood the truth. No one was coming to save me. There's a moment in every man's life when he realizes something painful, something ugly, something liberating. People don't value your effort. They value what they think you're worth. And for years, I had let everyone else decide my worth for me. I walked into the small shop where I worked, tired, drained, already hollow, and my boss looked at me with that same expression he always did. The kind that strips the dignity off your skin. The kind that says, without words, you're replaceable. He tossed a file onto the counter and said, "Try not to mess this up like everything else." Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply, like a bone cracking under years of pressure. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I didn't try to prove him wrong. I just stared at him and realized he wasn't describing me. He was describing the version of me I had allowed myself to become. I walked out, not because I had a plan, not because I had savings, not because I was fearless. I walked out because staying felt like dying a little more every day. And for the first time in years, I chose myself. There was no applause, no inspiration music, no miracle waiting outside the door, just silence. But that silence felt like the first real breath of a man who had been drowning for far too long. That day I didn't rise. I didn't succeed. I didn't transform. But I broke. And sometimes, breaking is the only way something new can finally begin. The first day without a job didn't feel brave. It didn't feel powerful. It didn't feel like freedom. It felt empty. People love to romanticize walking away, like it's some beautiful moment of self-respect, a turning point drenched in courage. But the truth is colder than that. Life doesn't slow down just because you finally chose yourself. Rent still knocks. Bills still hunt you down. The world keeps moving like your existence means nothing. That morning, I sat alone on the rooftop of the old building where I lived. No noise, no responsibilities. Just the sound of my thoughts. The same thoughts I had buried for years because facing them meant facing myself. I wasn't just jobless. I wasn't just broke. I was lost. A man with no direction, no support, no one in his corner, no one who believed he could ever become more than the failures behind him. And when you're at your lowest, the world doesn't help you up. Kicks you a little harder. My phone kept buzzing. Not with hope. Not with opportunities. Just reminders of who people thought I was. A cousin wrote in the family group, "Told you he wouldn't last. Always acting bigger than he is." Someone laughed. Someone reacted with a mocking emoji. They didn't know I had quit. But somehow their words still hit like they did. Because when you're struggling, people don't need truth to judge you. They just need an excuse. Later that evening, I went downstairs to buy bread. The shopkeeper, an old man who had watched me grow up, looked at me with sad eyes. "Beta, everything okay? You look tired." I forced a smile so he wouldn't ask more questions. He didn't know that smile took more strength than most people show in a lifetime. When I stepped outside, I saw two neighbors whispering. I heard my name. I heard the word useless. And strangely, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel hurt. I just felt numb. The kind of numbness that settles in after too many disappointments, too many setbacks, too many nights wondering if maybe everyone was right about you. But later that night, something happened. A moment so small it felt like nothing, yet it changed everything. I went back to my empty room, sat on the floor, leaned against the cold wall, and whispered to myself, "If everyone has given up on me, fine, let them. But I won't give up on myself." It wasn't confidence. It wasn't strength. It wasn't some powerful breakthrough. It was just a tired man making a quiet promise to his own reflection. A promise that one day, Whether the world notices or not, he will rise. And that promise was the first spark of a fire I hadn't felt in years. The first time I truly smiled in months, it wasn't because someone told me I was enough. It wasn't because I had money, a job, or recognition. It was because I finally forgave myself. I walked the quiet streets of the city one evening. The sun hung low, spilling gold and orange across the sky. The air smelled faintly of rain and asphalt, a scent that pulled memories from nights I had spent alone, wondering if life would ever feel fair. For years, I carried anger like armor. Toward my family, toward the world, toward everyone who had doubted me. But that evening, standing in the golden light, I realized the armor had only weighed me down. Forgiveness wasn't for them. It was for me. I thought of my family, the ones who laughed when I left and cried when they saw me succeed. I didn't rush to them. I didn't seek apologies. I simply understood that their opinions no longer held power over me. I thought of the mentors, the friends, even strangers who had challenged, doubted, or ignored me. I let go of the bitterness, and with that release came a strange, liberating sensation, like exhaling after holding my breath for years. And then came love. Not the love I had lost, not the love that betrayed me, but real, steady, patient love, the kind that builds instead of breaks. Someone who saw me, really saw me, and valued every scar, every struggle, every quiet victory. For the first time, I didn't have to prove anything. I could simply exist. And in that existence, I felt peace. I realized I had spent so much of my life chasing validation, proving my worth to everyone but myself. Life's harshest lessons had shown me the only approval that matters is your own. My journey wasn't about revenge, wealth, or recognition. It was about becoming whole. And in that wholeness, I discovered freedom, love, and a kind of happiness that couldn't be shaken by anyone or anything. The city hummed softly around me. Gentle wind through leaves, footsteps echoing on wet pavement, distant waves whispering across the shoreline. The sunset painted shadows long and golden, city lights beginning to flicker as night approached. I stopped for a moment, looked at the skyline, and whispered to myself, I left with nothing, and returned with everything that truly matters. No aplausos, no recognition, no one watching or celebrating. And I didn't care, because for the first time in my life, I had learned the most important truth. I was enough. The city looked different from the top of my office building. Not because the city had changed, but because I had. Years of struggle, betrayal, and heartbreak had carved me into someone unrecognizable from the boy my family once laughed at. I had left with nothing, yet now I stood with more than I had ever imagined. Not wealth, not status, but something far rarer. Peace, purpose, and mastery over my own life. I often thought back to those rainy nights, curled up on cold streets, wondering if I would ever rise. Every rejection, every insult, every door slammed in my face had led me here. It wasn't easy. It wasn't glamorous. But it was mine. I had learned the world doesn't hand anything to anyone. Success doesn't come to those who wait. It comes to those who fight quietly in the shadows, who build themselves when no one is watching. I looked around my office, the achievements, the projects, the people I had mentored, the lives I had touched, and I smiled. Not because I wanted revenge. Not because I needed to prove anyone wrong, but because I had proven myself right. I thought of my family, the ones who once mocked me. They saw me now. Some cried, not because of my success, but because they finally understood what they had lost. I didn't feel triumph. I felt compassion. Their laughter and their tears were never truly about me. They were about their own inability to recognize the strength they had underestimated. I realized then, I left with nothing, and the world tried to remind me of that every day. But what I built alone wasn't just wealth or recognition. It was a life defined by my own hands, my own choices, my own courage. In the end, the boy they laughed at had become the man they couldn't ignore. Not because I crushed anyone, but because I stood tall anyway. The wind brushed gently across the skyline. Distant traffic murmured below. Office lights hummed softly, and warm sunlight spilled through the glass walls. I felt the smooth railing under my hands, the steady beat of my heart, the quiet warmth of sunlight on my face, the soft whisper of the breeze against my skin. I turned from the window and walked through the office. Each step echoed softly against polished floors, a rhythm of someone who had walked through fire and emerged unburned. And in that quiet moment, I whispered to myself, I left with nothing and returned with everything that truly matters. Some goodbyes are blessings in disguise, and some storms are the paths to your greatest strength. The city pulsed below, alive and indifferent, and I finally felt alive, unstoppable.